What? Because we can't have a 30-year-old woman, 31-year-old woman running a business that's 40 million, right? I feel like no one's really tapped into a lot of things that I can do for them because I'm like that unicorn that can write an acquisition promo and that's all anybody wants me to do. But it's like your gold is in the back end.
Your copy has sold north of 9 figures across niches like financial, supplements, health, and more.
Yes, that is true. That is one of the things that makes my blood boil, that people say that anybody can do this and it's easy. How much money are you leaving on the table, spinning your wheels and using these cheap people who don't really know what the heck they're doing?
If you have never had a client before, what is the advice that you would give to somebody for getting that first client?
Well,
Kim Krause Schwalm.
you got it. No hyphens.
Thank you. No hyphens. Thank you so much for joining on Copy That today.
I'm thrilled to be here, Sean.
One of the reasons why I'm actually very excited to talk to you about today is because one of the most common questions I get is about how to get clients, or when you do have clients, how to get paid more by those clients,
Right.
or how to get more clients.
Right.
And I have to say, you literally wrote the book on getting clients. I imagine, and this is just a guess, that you probably have a lot to say about getting clients.
I do. And I think more so it's really about what do you do with them once you got them, right? Once you hook them in. At what point do you talk about money? How do you talk about it? How do you close it?
Before we get into all the discussion about what people really want to hear, which is how does one get clients, normally I ask guests to give a little credibility reel for themselves. I want to do something a little different with you.
Okay.
I have a series of true-false questions about you, rumors that I've gathered on the internet.
Oh my God. Is this going to be recorded? Is this being recorded?
This is all being recorded.
Okay.
And so I want to know if these rumors about you online are true.
Oh my gosh, I'm curious what
I
you
got
found.
them from
'cause
Brian
I
Kurtz.
Google
I got
myself
them.
every once in a while.
I found a lot of information about you. True or false?
Okay.
Your copy has sold north of 9 figures across niches like financial, supplements, health, and more.
Yes, that is true.
Okay. Wow. All right. True or false? You were the first female copywriter to get a boardroom control, beating several legendary copywriters along the way.
I did. Well, I only beat one to get that first control, but then I did go on to beat others. But that first one was a name that starts with P. And I can say it because I've bragged about it before, but it was Paris Lampropoulos. And it was his tax hotline control. And it had been considered unbeatable. It had run for about 7 years. And it was one of these faux envelope packages that looked like you got notified by the IRS. So it was really a really smartly done package. And I just took what was working for some of their other newsletters, which was like a faux issue, and did that. And what's interesting is the first time out, my headline and lead, going back, they weren't as strong as they could be. And they were a little too clever. And I didn't beat him by 15%. Like it came neck and neck. And you have to beat by at least 15% to get into control. So they let me go back and do a second try. And I just basically, I'm going to go with a straightforward, benefit-oriented headline and a different lead, just more, addressing some of their biggest pain points about taxes. And that's when the second try I beat them.
Nice. And was it still a Magalog style package?
It was still the faux. Yeah, it was everything else stayed the same. It was literally just this has changed that. It was something like a tax revolt type headline, with the cutesy little tea party kind of lead. And then it was just, let's just go to simplify your taxes and give yourself a tax cut. And let's talk about all the changes and how you're going to keep up with them. And what if you're paying too much and all that stuff, right? And agitate those pain points. Just changing 3 paragraphs of copy and a headline. Everything else stayed the same. Got the control.
Well done.
Thank you.
I applaud you. Okay. All right. So we're at 2 truths right now.
Okay.
Let's go for another rumor.
Uh-oh.
You worked as a publisher, marketing director, and brand manager for over a decade before you made the jump to freelance writing.
It's true. I worked in marketing for almost 13 years. Yes. And I also, maybe this is one of your other rumors, but go on. I did other things too. But yeah, for 13 years, I was mainly a marketer who kind of learned how to write a little copy while I was doing my job.
And then you switched fully into writing copy.
I did. I decided to just go for it and become a freelance copywriter. And I can talk more about all the reasons behind that if you want to hear it.
Absolutely.
But let's get through your questions.
Let's get through the questions.
Yeah.
True or false? You helped launch and run a supplement business that did $40 million in its first 3 years.
Yes. So just to be accurate, I helped launch the company. It was a subsidiary of the publishing company that I worked for. I'd worked there for maybe 6 months, and then we were like, what do these people want? Because they had just launched the largest and first ever alternative health newsletter. And I was brought in to like sell things on the back end and scout out products and even create things in-house. And so I would do all that, plus write like anywhere from a 4 to 6 page insert. We just test. It was like a alternative health testing lab. Like it was like this really new niche, right? And we're like, these people are screaming for Dr. Whitaker's vitamins. And so they're like, we need to start a business, and it was like, and honestly, all the people that had been there for a while, like nobody wanted to touch it. It was like, oh, that's crazy. Like we're a publisher, right?
Yeah.
So they asked me, and I'm like, sure, I'll do it. And I even came up with the name Healthy Directions. And then, we grew it to the equivalent of 40 million in today's dollars, but it got to 23 million in annual sales by year 3.
Oh, wow.
And that was just going to his list, just one list, just 300,000
No affiliate
subscribers.
deals.
Oh, that was it.
That's amazing.
Because, this is why I get so crazed. I feel like no one's really tapped into a lot of things that I can do for them, because I'm like that unicorn that can write an acquisition promo, and that's all anybody wants me to do. But it's like your gold is in the back end. Like this was the back end. This was a back end business initially, and then we just were like, what's the back end to the back end? Right? I mean, when we were planning this, and I was working with Bob King, who's no longer with us, and Jay Abraham was consulting. And it was like, what are you going to do when you get that first order? How are you going to get that next order, right? Mm-hmm. We were just subscription focused all the way through and building that business. And this was pre-internet. I mean, we had email stuff we used for Office, but no one was really doing that kind of marketing. Mm-hmm. So everything was in the mail. And what are you going to do in the box? And what are you going to do here? And what do you do there, right? And it was probably more than 23 million within the first 3 years, because that was what the sales were at annually by year 3. And then in today's dollars, over 40 million.
So that rumor is true as well. True or false? You were mentored by Brian Kurtz, one of the greats, and you've personally mentored a slew of some of the best A-list copywriters alive today.
I think both of those are a little bit of a stretch.
Oh, we found one that's not entirely true.
We found one that's not entirely true. Was that on my website? I'm just kidding. So Brian is somebody I would say I would consider him a mentor in that he's somebody that's a friend that I've gotten a lot of advice from, more like how to run my business or this or that. Like he's never mentored me like on copy or anything like that. Yeah. I've never really had a copy mentor.
Oh.
There wasn't I didn't work for a company I obviously learned from people working at Phillips Publishing, but I was, copy was just something I did as part of my job. So I would have opportunities to get feedback from different people. This was all like back end copy. Like they brought in the big guns, Jim Rutz and Gary Bencivenga.
For the front end.
For the front end, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't have any of those people like looking at my copy. I did, when I went freelance though, I did have a few people who were very generous in taking a look at my copy and just giving me feedback. And one of them was David Deutsch, and he gave me feedback a few times. There was, whenever Bob Bly was speaking at a conference, and sometimes it'd be a thing where like, if you submit your copy, they'll look at it, so sometimes I would get Bob Bly to give me copy reviews. I don't know if you remember a guy named Don Houtman. He wrote a very famous promo, something like Speak Spanish Like a Diplomat. Mm-hmm. Really kind guy. So again, when I was really just kind of starting out, they would look at my copy sometimes, and the most they would ever accept was a fruit basket or something. And so I had a few people here and there, but I mostly had to just, crack the code and figure it out on my own. And sometimes, have complete bombs or have the near misses, like the first one I explained to you, where, hey, come back, give it a second try, boom. That happened on at least 2 or 3 other occasions where first try, do some other tweaking, get a huge winner, right?
Yeah.
And I, one of those tweaks ended up being, they hired me to write a whole new promo, but on the first try, I did not beat Jim Rutz. This was a financial promo. And I was very new to writing financial promos, but 6 months later, they hired me to do another package, and I beat Jim Rutz. And then they ran my control for at least a couple years, different iterations and stuff. And then they were doing a relaunch from the editorial side. They brought in a different team and blah, blah, blah. So they went and paid Jim Rutz another $100,000, write us a whole new launch package, right? They retired my control. And then about 3 or 4 months later, they come back like, it's not really doing as well as we'd like. You think you can maybe update your control? And I'm like, sure. And I charge them like maybe $3 or $4 grand. I updated my control, beat them a second time.
Nice. Well done. Well done. That's worth another cheers.
Okay.
Nice. I do wonder, looking at this from like, cis, hetero, white man, how difficult it is for women, especially back then, to crack into marketing and direct response marketing especially. Because you mentioned like not really having a solid mentor figure, people who would look at your copy sometimes,
right?
Especially if you pay them.
Right.
But, I had people who were willing to work with me, and it was very easy to get mentored, within the confines of the business that I worked.
Mm-hmm.
And every woman that I've ever spoken to, that has generally not been the case. And I was wondering if you might speak to that experience or speak to your experience when it comes to that.
I don't mean to imply that I've never had mentors, because I did have a 13-year plus, career before getting into becoming a freelance copywriter. And I did have a number of mentors. I mean, they weren't necessarily copywriters or people that you would know of, but, different women in companies that I worked for. So
Right.
I worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield, actually up in Towson when they used to be located there. Mm-hmm. And there was a senior VP of our division. And, she would always take me to lunch, maybe once every couple of weeks. My cubicle was right outside her office practically. So, she'd order a glass of wine. So I'd order a glass of wine, and so, I had some, just kind of that indirect kind of mentoring, from her. Then there was this other woman who came to work there briefly, and she had a very strange name. I won't repeat it because it's very memorable. But she was kind of this just brash, Harvard MBA, but she was not like, she would always be a super tall woman. She'd wear these really tall heels, and she just wore kind of wild clothes. So she was very colorful. And she just took a liking to me, and she kind of took me under her wing, and she always told me, it's like, if you want to, because I was just kind of getting into marketing, making that shift into marketing, because I actually was hired there to go in their actuarial department, because I have a degree in math and stats, believe it or not. And so she's like, if you're going to be in marketing, you got to actually sell something. You got to get some sales experience, right? That's like some of the advice that she would give me. Yeah. So I definitely had the opportunity to be mentored by some pretty dynamic women, kind of early on in my career, which Good. I think between that and I'm the oldest child, and I always had a very good relationship with my father. And I feel like, I just always felt pretty confident, Mm-hmm. I think confidence is such a huge thing, like believing you can do something, even if you really can't, but like, or it's figure outable. Like, I know I can figure out how to do this, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I did with trying to break into long form, because right away I wasn't like, people weren't like, oh, let's hire Kim to write a promo. It's like I had never written a long promo, right? Mm-hmm. But I was just cranking out a bunch of copy, like back end copy, and then like, she's pretty good. Like maybe we give her. That's what happened with getting the shot, to go up against Jim Rutz, right? And then as soon as I beat Jim Rutz, it's like Brian Kurtz couldn't call me fast enough. Like, oh, I'd been trying to break in the boardroom, but it's like whatever, Right. It's like, oh, you beat Jim Rutz, okay. So, but yeah, I just started doing a lot of back end, and then it was like, okay, how do I write one of these things, right? And just figuring it out. Like I had a huge swipe file. I remembered a lot of things just from management meetings and things we would talk about at Phillips and talking about different promos. So, I would just apply those. And also when I was a publisher at one point, for Jay Abraham's newsletter and also Dennis Waitley's newsletter, mm-hmm. We were working directly with copywriters. So that was my role, where I worked with Doug Deanna, Paris Rompopoulos, David Deutsch. And this was when they were mm-hmm. kind of they were mid-level copywriters.
Oh, back in the day.
Oh yeah, at this point, right? And I was the client. Mm-hmm. So from all those experiences, I was able to kind of cobble together, like, how do I write one of these things, right?
Nice. You actually have a term for what you just described in your book. I think you call it hottest girl at the bar syndrome.
Well, that's a little different. So I had all this great success launching this supplement business. Mm-hmm. And it got into like year 3, and we're like probably the most profitable, fastest growing by far division of the company. And it's like, at this point, maybe I was running a team of like 8 or 9 people. And I can only imagine the board conversation went something along the lines of, oh, wow, this division's like, this subsidiary is doing really well. Like, who's running it? Mm-hmm. Oh, some 30-year-old woman, blah, blah, blah. Oh, so she's got supplement industry experience? Well, no. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We got to bring in somebody. This is like, if we're going to really, maximize this, we've got to bring in somebody from the industry, right? So they told me, look, we're going to hire a president, right? I mean, my title was like some bullshit, like executive director of blah, 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 right? But I was not like president. And so I was interviewing for the president. Like, I was very much involved with this, but obviously it wasn't my decision. To make a long story short, they hired this guy from a direct response kind of supplement business, and a much older guy. And he's literally he doesn't do anything. Like, he's always coming to my office like, oh, I got a board presentation. You can whip that up? Okay, fine. I'm like literally doing everything still. And he's kind of a figurehead, right? To make them feel better about what? Because we can't have a 31-year-old woman running a business that's 40 million, right?
No bitterness.
I'm not bitter. Yeah. I'm not bitter. Okay, you want to hear bitter?
I want to hear bitter.
Because this is why you got the booze here.
Of course.
Okay. I had a miscarriage with my first pregnancy, right? And this is when this person was in charge. And, we had very aggressive goals every month, right? And I was off for a week. You call that off, right? Recovering, grieving. And I come back and he's in my office and he's like, we didn't make our numbers last week. And something just kind of clicked in my head. I mean, I didn't go insane or anything. I probably could have. But I was just like, I'm done. I can't work for this guy. I'm tired of propping him up. I mean, it hadn't been that long, right? 3-4 months. I don't know. I was like, this is crazy. So I decided to just let a few people within the company know that, hey, I'm interested in transferring out, other opportunities. Within a week, I had 3 offers within the company. So yes, I was definitely the hot girl at the bar, right? I had people, everybody wanted to hire me into their division. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to go work with this one woman and work on the J. Abraham business, et cetera, et cetera. And so the guy that I was working for in the supplement business, he brings in this woman to take over my role, who we used to work with. Well, within a week or two, everybody caught on to them, and they were both fired.
Nice.
They're out. And I'm in this other division, and I've just been completely mommy tracked, and I'm talking with this one guy that I was working with. I won't name his name either. He's still very much a friend, but he's just like, I think at that point and this was in 1998, my base was $100,000, right? Yeah. I was making good money, but they're like, oh, and they couldn't cut my salary because that would be illegal. But it's like, I don't know what to do. You were paying all this money. I'm like, yeah, like you had no idea what to do with me. I mean, it was terrible. So here I'm like, I just had my first child. I've had this amazing career, and I find myself grieving for my career, Yeah. And I was like, this is crazy. So I started interviewing different jobs outside the company. And then I was just like, you know what? I remember having this conversation. My father had passed away about a year, prior to that, actually just months before that. And at one point he was like, maybe you ought to do this copywriting thing you've been talking about. So I kind of remembered that conversation. I was like, yeah, you know what? Screw it. So I got like a retainer arrangement with another supplement business that was nearby. And it was only going to take like half my time, and it was going to replace 90% of my income. And then right from there, he referred me to other clients. Mm-hmm. And then people within the company that I left, again, don't burn bridges, right? People were referring me right. I had like just full load of clients. I made 50% more my first year, and it just went up from there.
Yeah. I want to dig into that more, because one of the biggest, I think most important piece of advice that you give in the book is about the power of referrals.
Oh, it's huge.
And it seems like that you've built your freelance career off of just doing well for people, so well that they're willing to recommend you to other people.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One is, and I think you had a kind of a similar advantage that you gave yourself, which was you go work for a really great company initially, right? I mean, Phillips Publishing was like 5 times bigger, at least, than Agora was at the time. Like they were considered, one of the top direct response publishers, or if not the top direct response publisher, right? So I worked with so many amazing people. And yeah, so like that was right there was a massive network. I mean, to this day still serves me, like if you think of it that way, but like people that I still keep in touch with, and we're always helping each other out, referring copywriters or whatever. So that's a huge advantage to give yourself, not to mention just the huge amount of learning you get. And then when you are like ex-Agora or ex-Phillips like I was, it's like people are like, oh, you used to work at Phillips? I think we need to talk, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like it just opens doors.
It's a key,
right?
yeah.
So I would say if you have the opportunity to go in-house at a really great company, it can be really huge. And then, yes, the other part is always, have a network, get out to events, meet people. We met, right?
Yeah.
Like what's happening now, right? Like you have to, there was no LinkedIn. There was no Upwork. There was none of that when I was starting out. If you ask me for advice, if you think you're going to get this book and it's like, what, new, hack can I do on LinkedIn? No, it's not going to have that stuff in. But it's about working well with clients, like you said. Mm-hmm. Think everybody your neighbors, the people that your kids go to school with, whoever, like they might know, hey, I'm a copywriter now and I'm just starting my business. If you have anybody, here's what I do. Like people want to help you, right?
Yeah.
And just get referrals.
Like outreach is a skill. And there are principles to that skill. There are strategies to that skill. And then there are the tactics. And it seems so frequently that people sell the tactics but ignore the strategies and the principles.
Right.
And so people learn, for example, how one might hook somebody via Instagram DMs, for example. And they don't understand why it works. They don't understand, like, oh, how do I translate this strategy to another situation?
Right.
They don't understand what's actually going on rhetorically behind it. They don't really realize that what they're doing is a facet of actual copywriting.
Yeah, I think it's a little more than that. And again, it depends on where you're at in your career.
Of course.
I mean, where I was at, I wasn't necessarily known as a copywriter, but within the company, I was known to be good at copy. Mm-hmm. And obviously for the other successes I had. So that was part of my reputation that mm-hmm. would then be kind of conveyed in the different things. So, there's different levels of referrals, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, Kim's a great copywriter. She's done some work for our company, or, you've got to hire her. Ding, 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 ding. That's like the 10 out of 10, right? They're gonna want to just, they won't even blink. Like, oh, okay, that's how, and you'll be like, shit, I should have asked for more money, right? They're just ready to hire you, right? And then at the bottom end of that would just be maybe somebody on Carpool or something, and they're like, oh yeah, she does this thing, I don't know, like, and they don't even know if you're any good at it, So I think you've got to think about what kind of proof are you, and again, it's not necessarily coming from you, but when somebody else says it, it's so much better. Like when somebody else brags about you, it's so much better than if you like go up to somebody and they're like, get this jerk away from me, right? Because you're like, oh, I wrote like 5 different control packages and I beat Jim Rutz and like, oh, like go away, right? But it's so much better if somebody just comes up and says, oh my gosh, you're talking to Kim? She's a great copywriter. You got to talk to her,
Yeah.
That is like worth the price of the conference and the hotel and the dinners and everything else, right? So that's why you want to get out to events too.
I do have one quote from the book that I quibble with a little bit.
A quote from the book? Is
Indeed.
It one of my quotes?
And it's something that you wrote that
I
quibble with a little bit.
Okay, well, let's have a fight.
Unlike the sugarcoating and sales pitches you may hear from others, copywriting is not an easy way to make money. It takes talent, commitment, hard work, and resilience to succeed. And
you quibble with that?
I do.
What, are you like untalented? I've never seen your copy, so
true. Maybe
you've made it without
any talent whatsoever.
With zero talent.
It might be true. No. My quibble is that what are you talking about? Everybody's talking about how copywriting these days is an easy way to make money from home with your feet in the sand of a beach.
Oh yeah.
Somehow, ironically,
right.
In 2 places
you have a
at
sandbox in your desk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I one of the common threads in a lot of copywriting discourse these days is about how it is a uniquely easy way to make money.
Is this like Andrew Tate?
That is one of the culprits.
Is he still in jail?
He might still be in jail.
So, yeah, I wouldn't listen to him. That is one of the things that makes my blood boil, that people say that anybody can do this and it's easy and, it looks easy. It's almost like you see these ads and even for us long form people, right? We're like, oh my God, like they literally have 4 words on this ad. It's hard. All of it's hard, right? Yeah. Because it's not just what you see. It's all the thinking and research and everything that goes in behind that. And then it's taking really often very complex topics and really dumbing them down and making it interesting and understandable. And all that is like a huge skill level. So yeah, it has been oversold. I'll never forget when, it's so funny because when I first started, I'd been doing it for 2-3 years. I finally started getting my first royalty checks. It was back when everything was just mailed to you, right? And I'd go out to the cul-de-sac and pull my royalty checks out of the mailbox. And that song from Dire Straits would go through my head, get your money for nothing and whatever, which I think it's actually chicks for free, not checks for free.
It is chicks for free.
I understand, but I would change it to checks for free, right?
Fair enough.
It felt like free money, right? And then I even thought, wow, somebody should do like an infomercial about this. I mean, it's kind of just joking in my head, right? And then literally companies started doing it, like not necessarily infomercials, but like, we can sell this, right?
Yeah.
We can sell this. And so that's what happened. Like starting 15 plus years ago is like, let's sell this as, a way to make money, and we need more people to do it anyway, right? So here we are. And I think hopefully more businesses are starting to realize, it's like, no, actually you really need good copywriters who know what they're doing. And how much money are you leaving on the table, spinning your wheels and using these cheap people who don't really know what the heck they're doing, right? Or got into it with this idea that they're going to do minimal work. Who the heck wants to hire somebody like that? I like to consider myself one of the hardest working copywriters out there. Like when I'm actually working on a project, like I can do a deep dive for hours down a rabbit hole, but you know what I mean? It's that thinking, and I'll dig and I'll dig and I'll come up with something. Like there was this one example where I found out a new way to make a claim, and it had to be compliant because it was a supplement, and it was like during COVID, and it was regarding the SARS virus, but of course I couldn't say that. But it was basically like this 100 times claim, right? And it's a longer story I get into one of my courses. But all I did was write a new email, driving traffic to an existing sales page that was already very, very successful, and simply changing that email using my little nugget that I dug out. Increased the revenue of the sales page by 33%. And just in 6 months, I made an additional $50,000 at least in royalties from an email.
Yeah.
Because I did that digging, and the client made an extra $1 million, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, if you want crap, it's easy. If you want to produce crap.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just phone it in. I mean, it doesn't take me, I don't have to spend a lot of time to actually write really good copy. But if I want to write something great, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. And I was speaking to Mark Ford relatively recently, and he said it's a very akin to like high athletic performance, especially if you're writing long form. It's like you have to be operating at such a high level for such an extended period of time.
Right.
That a lot of people just don't have that stamina.
Yeah, people just don't realize how hard, especially long form. But even to write good emails that just don't sound like every single thing that's out there, it's and just be able to write well. Just in the business world, like if you know how to write well, it gives you such an advantage for a lot of different things. Like my father was an electrical engineer, but he was also a very good writer. And that really helped him because he could actually communicate his ideas. He could, so it's a fabulous skill, but it's always one of those things that I know for all the years I worked in marketing, I would interview people for marketing roles, and Phillips would always look for people who could also write. They really valued copy. And so many people I would talk to with these amazing, impressive resumes, like, oh no, I can't write. I'm not a good writer. There's a lot of smart people who just can't freaking write. So you gotta be smart, and you gotta be able to write. And now we're down to like maybe 5% of people,
I would, yeah, and I would add one more layer to that, which is that I've spoken to a number of people on this podcast, a number of people in my network who said, like, I knew that in our world, you have to be smart. That's just a prerequisite.
Yeah.
And you have to know how to write well. And so what's the other acid test there? You have to work harder
But you
than
have to be
everybody
curious.
else.
Curiosity is huge.
Yeah. Curiosity is huge, and the ability to work harder than your
Yeah.
peers.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Being able to think outside the box, not to just look at something like, how do I just copy that? Wait, where are we?
we said the thing.
We said the thing.
You have some advice for people based on common questions that you seem to get from a lot of your newbies. And I noticed that they're basically the same questions that we commonly get. Let's start with a conversation about niching. And should we? Should a newbie like go into financial? Is that a thing? Or should they choose health? Or should they choose fitness? What should somebody do?
Fitness is good in just other ways, and health and financial.
Yeah.
So here's what I did, and here's what I think people should do, because they always should just do what I did. No, I'm just kidding. I think that if you already have a natural background for a particular niche, you'd be crazy not to pursue that niche, unless it's just something you're like, God, I just can't even want to think about that ever again in my life, right? But like, I left Phillips, and I had launched a supplement business, written copy for it, and grown it an impressive amount, right? So of course, it was fairly easy to get work with other supplement companies. I mean, in fact, that was my retainer thing, right? For 6 months, that gave me that bridge. So yeah, and I also liked it. I still to this day love supplements, take a ton of them. I love researching and writing about supplements, right? So, but I didn't limit myself to that. If I had, I probably would have had potentially large gaps in, I mean, it would have been like, well, how strictly do I contain that? Or do I do other health stuff? Or do I do books? Or do I do newsletters? And then do I do other types of newsletters outside of health? So just kind of, I went fairly broad right out of the gate. So I kind of I just wrote for whatever came along pretty much. I mean, it's usually pretty good stuff, but sometimes there were some questionable things. Or I remember once like writing for some agency, and they were doing stuff for infomercials, and I was writing a promotion for space bags. So they're like this storage thing you buy, and you can like, I don't even know how they work. Like you stuff a bunch of clothes or blankets, and then you do something with your vacuum, and it like gets really flat, and then you can just, So it was like a resell, like, hey, you bought some space bags. Well, how about more? We got a deal, right? That kind of thing. I wrote for like a nonprofit, Houston Museum of Science. I wrote for a couple B2B things. I mean, I just wrote a lot of different stuff. And so here's the thing. Not only did I just constantly, I never really had a slow moment. I always had money coming in. I learned so much from that early experience of not just only writing supplement copy, right? But getting exposure to, it's almost like if you're working in an agency, right? I guess, I don't know, I've never worked in an agency, but it's like, we're doing this thing now. No, next week we're doing this. And here we're doing, like, it kept it interesting. But it was like, okay, how do I figure out who buys a space bag, right? Or who's going to donate to the Houston Museum of Science? And just being able to approach each project like, okay, now I got to think different, right? It's not just relying on the same old, right? Or the stuff I already know. And I think I just went through a lot of growth during that. And it was always a different type of promo. Sometimes it's space ads, sometimes it's a this, it's a that, right? It's an insert going in a newsletter. I was writing emails. I was writing website copy. So, I just got a lot of different experience before I got to the point where I was like booked out a year with maybe 6 long form packages a year, right? Or 5 or 6, right?
Standard.
But that was like for at least 3 years or so, that's what I did until I started getting into a regular pattern of strictly long form.
Yeah.
But then I got to a point several years after that. I think by the point, I guess it was around 2007. It was right before the big financial market crash. So I was writing maybe 25% of the time I was writing like a financial package or two, but then I was mostly writing health, right? Yeah. And I just got to the point where it's like, I'd do like 4 packages in a row that were health. And then I would oh, we got a financial one. So I'd be kind of like, oh God, what's going on? I got to get back into financial, And then I decided, I think I'm just not going to do financial anymore. I'm just going to, this was like, I was a good 12 or 15 years in when I kind of said, I'm just doing health, right? I'm just going to mainly do that. And then literally like 4 months later, the market just blew up. All my friends that had financial controls were crying into their beer. They're like, oh, they're not mailing my packages. And it's like, oh, everything's evergreen over here.
Yeah.
Don't need to worry.
People still need
need their health
krill
stuff.
oil.
They're buying their joint supplements, man.
Yep. Chondroitin. It'll never go out of style.
It's like, still got creaky joints, market's down, doesn't matter. You if anything, more people are looking for cheaper alternatives to drugs.
True story.
So that was when I kind of niched, and then I have dabbled in other things. And honestly, I really like having a little bit of a variety, to be honest. So I think it just depends on where you're at. Now, if you're just brand new, and you're like, I just want to focus and get really good at one thing, that makes sense. But you'd be crazy to be like, when you're going to turn away a client when you hardly have any work. Well, I'm sorry, I don't do like B2B. It was like, just freaking take it on and learn from it, do it. Right. Yeah. Like I said, I took on a lot of different projects, and it made me a better copywriter.
Yeah. I think that's extremely good advice. It's basically the identical advice that we give on the show, but it's nice to have somebody.
Really? I was watching a show. I just stole that from you. No, I'm just kidding.
Fair.
No, I've been saying this for years.
We have too.
You got it from me.
Maybe I did. Maybe it's like out there in the ether, and
it's one of those rumors online.
Tell me then, if somebody's starting out, should they focus on short form copy first, or should they go straight into long form copy if that's what they want to do?
I think they should start with short form.
Oh, why is that?
It's probably the same advice you give people.
That's the shtick.
I know.
Of these podcasts.
It's sort of funny. Like you're kind of saying it like you sounded really fake, though, the way you said it.
I know, but
so
I
why
did
is that?
Ironically.
Yeah, it's hard for you to lie. You can't lie, Sean. So it's because it's not as hard. It's really hard to write long form and to learn to write it well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so start with, like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time, right? Start with these small bites of copy and get really good at writing those.
How should one go about practicing that? Like, if somebody were to sit down and be like, okay, short form, I've never written 8 copies before.
Oh, no.
I
don't
did that purposely.
Say it plural.
I did it purposely.
Oh. Okay, I got to drink after that one. This is why you have the alcohol.
What should I write first, and how should I go about actually practicing that?
Practicing your copies?
Practicing your copies, yeah.
Okay, so let's say you don't have any clients and you want to learn copywriting.
Yes.
Right? So hopefully you either got a really great book or course or something you're going through, right? And you've decided to start following something that either you hear, like, this is a great company that does great marketing, great copy, like maybe one of the Agora companies, whatever, right? And you get on their email list and you start looking at the stuff they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. Here's what I would start with. I would look for one of those sales pages that you see a lot, that emails are driving traffic to. And I would look at that email and I would look at that sales page and say, how could I write a better email to make people more likely to want to go to that sales page? And that's what I would start with. I would just start crafting those short 1 page or so emails, and with playing around with brainstorming different subject lines. I would start there. That would be a little project I would create for myself. Mm-hmm. Another writing project and then ideally you would take that to somebody and maybe get a critique, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing I would do is I would look at that sales page and I would be like, is there a buried headline in here or a different angle or some, that looked kind of interesting, right? And maybe you do a little digging. And again, this can be a little more challenging because you don't have the client's internal info or the studies or whatever, but you can go find stuff too. And then you just write a new headline and lead. And you just play with that, right? And then actually, if you do some of these fairly well, you can submit these to a company and get your foot in the door.
Oh, the whole spec thing is something I'm going to be talking about and asking you later. So we can't jump there yet.
Okay.
We can't jump
but
there
you know
yet.
what I'm saying?
Yes.
But this is how you start. Well, you start to have some samples.
Yep.
You create samples for yourself, right? But yeah, and ideally just get get some work, some paid work, even if it's, I've never done Upwork. One of these things, you're like, it's beneath me. Fine, just do it. And then get some samples that you can show people of actual work. Plus, you're going to start to learn, like, how do I deal with clients? How do I not deal with clients, right? Because you'll learn some of the tough lessons, right? Like, oh, I should never do that again, right? Or you can just read my book.
Client Badassery Secrets.
But
now
chances
available.
are, even with you get great advice, you're still going to make some mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, that's what I would do. That's if you're just starting out, look for things to write copy for and create practice copy projects for yourself.
Yeah. One piece of advice I often give to people is, if you don't know where to start and you're just looking at that blank page, just pick a product you know fairly well and write an email that would link to a product page for that thing that you know well. Mm-hmm. And then try to do it again for something you don't know well, something that would require you to do research.
Right.
Because then you're just easing your way in, getting a toehold, one little spot at a time.
Right.
And that
start with something small that's not too intimidating or overwhelming and kind of work from there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this all leads to something that you say in the book, which is that you advise people, if they want to have a successful career and get these referrals and get those big checks, the checks for free.
The checks for free, not really free.
Right.
Yes.
Right. You have to put in sweat equity into it.
Exactly.
You recommend that people get dangerously good.
Yes.
How does one then go from practicing an email to getting dangerously good?
Being constantly thirsty to figure out, crack the code behind copy that's working well. At the same time, while you're practicing, I'm trying to, write stuff that's good, right? But you also, some of my best students that have gone on to become, I guess you could call them A-list level copywriters, were the ones that would every day have a practice where they would sit down and not necessarily write out by hand, because I never did that. I know there's a lot of science behind that, honestly, and how things embed in your brain, and it may not be a bad idea to do it, but studying and analyzing a promo really in depth, why is this working, right? And I did that. That's kind of what I did, how I figured it out, right? So people who do that every day and constantly studying good copy, I think that is definitely one of the ways to get dangerously good. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, how many reps do you get? How many times do you get up at bat? Does Babe Ruth, did he get to be that point? We're doing a baseball analogy. I really don't know very much about baseball. But, it was because he got so many times up to bat, right, that he constantly got to the point that he could get dangerously good, right? Yeah. Or Hank Aaron or Lou Gehrig, right? So, yeah, you got to get yourself up to bat. You got to get in action. So you got to do all these things. You got to be a serious student of copywriting. When I mean that, you're practicing every day, you're analyzing good copy every day, you're constantly thirsty for that knowledge, you're reading classic books, you're going through courses, you're not just freaking buying them. You're literally going to do them. And as Ben Settle would say, you go through it 10 different times, right? You do it. You go through the book 10 times, you do the stuff. And that's how you get dangerously good. And then you get, you're doing all the things in my book where you're talking about who the hell do I know that might know somebody who needs a copywriter, right? Mm-hmm. And you get out there and you take on as many projects as you can. You don't be no, I only do certain types of niche. No, you just write everything you can. And that's how you start to get dangerously good.
Good. Now, there is a caveat that you have in the book, though, a quote from somebody else, not you this time, which is that...
Was it your quote?
No, it's
I didn't know you then.
It's funny how I'm stealing stuff from you and you're stealing stuff from me. It's a weird little human
world.
Centipede of copywriters.
That's all it is.
It's terrible.
A few people. That's it. We're all just.
It's a small pond.
Yeah.
Our little world. Anyway,
it's going to be a much bigger pond.
It has.
It has.
But I would still say that as far as people operating at a reasonably high level in this business, there aren't very many, and most of us know each other.
We do. It's really fun. It's fun that we can just kind of text each other or call each other or whatever.
Hey, show up to my hot third-story room and
it's
sit
the best.
under blinding lights.
It's the best. I love it. No air conditioning.
Yes. Well, it's a Baltimore row home. What do you expect?
It is a Baltimore row home. I love Baltimore.
So You say, and this relates back to what you were just talking about when it comes to getting good at copywriting. The quote was, copywriters don't get truly good until after they're 45 years old.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Did I say that word?
It's totally fine. We might bleep it a little bit, but.
So, yes. So I remember hearing that. Let's see. When did I go freelance? I think I was like probably 36, maybe. I was at a conference because it was around that time. Like I started, so there used to be this conference. It was always DC in June called the Newsletter Publishers Association, NEPA, right? And then it later became SIPA, which was, I forget now what that stood for. I think they were trying to get into online
like a
stuff.
Horrible disease.
Well, no, but it was literally.
I got the SIPAs.
We did a lot of sipping at the SIPA.
Okay.
Because there were a lot of happy hours, so it kind of seemed appropriate, right?
Fair enough. I'm glad we're carrying on.
We
the tradition.
did the SIPA. So, but anyway, I remember going to one of these NEPA or SIPA things, and there was this guy who was pretty well known on the financial side, and yeah, and I think I was just a year or two into freelance copywriting, and he's like, "Oh yeah, oh you're a copywriter, oh yeah, copywriters don't get to be any good till they're at least 45." And I think it wasn't like, a year or two after that, maybe a couple years, that I beat Jim Rutz and then beat Paris Lampopoulos. So, yeah. Who do you want to believe?
If you have never had a client before, what is the advice that you would give to somebody for getting that first client?
Well, my advice, I'm just going to put a little disclaimer on it, is a little more limited just in terms of there's obviously so many different ways to get those first clients. Like if I was starting out today with all the different things out there, I would maybe put myself out and try Upwork or something. I know a few people have courses on how to really use it. I would either Google your way to getting up to speed on how to really make money with it, or do one of these courses. And then I would go out there and just get some rounds with some clients, right? Just learn, right? Learn what it's like to work with a client.
Yeah.
I think the advantage that it could give you is, they make it a lot safer, right? You're going to get paid. I mean, I can't tell you, even being a fairly seasoned marketer, experienced person in industry, I had people ghost me. I had people stiff me on payment. I had people be really slow payers. That's one of the biggest issues, right? So if you don't really know what you're doing with contracts, agreements, getting in advance, et cetera, obviously you're going to learn a lot from reading my book, but, it's actually a pretty safe way to get started. They didn't have anything like that. I was just it's like, back in the day, your parents would just go out and play. You don't know what kind of trouble we got into, right? We were just off, go figure it out, right? Throwing us out to the wolves. We don't do that with our children these days, right? I never did it so much with my child.
Plus or minus.
Well, but you know what I mean. It's kind of like that. So I think that would actually, that's what I would do. I've never done Upwork, so I don't know what it's like. I've used Upwork to hire people.
Yeah.
Seems like a good platform. I'd say start there. And the best case scenario would be that you actually know somebody who can refer you. That's obviously going to be great. Even that person's going to be a little skeptical. Well, what has this person ever written, right? Oh, I've got these little practice things over here. If they're really relevant to their business, let's say you go to a publisher and they're like, oh, I wrote these emails going to a publication page, sales page, and they like them, that could open a door. But, chances of that happening are probably very low probability for that kind of match. So I would say start there. That's what I would do.
Nice. I think that's extremely good advice. I think the one thing you don't want to do as a newbie is limit yourself. Oh, I am only going to do cold emails to businesses.
I just think you're setting yourself up to be exploited. You're setting yourself up to be exploited with cold emails. Now, maybe I'm just an old-fashioned oldster. I don't know. But even the slightest whiff of desperation, you are at, and I talk a lot about this in my book, you are at such a, worsened negotiating position. You should never seem too hungry or desperate. right? I talk about that literally in the introduction. And when you cold DM, like you're like looking desperate. You should look busy, even if you're not. If someone calls you up, like, or emails you, they're not going to call you up probably, and like, we need somebody to start tomorrow. But even if you're twiddling your thumbs, doing nothing, like, well, you know what? I could probably get to this next week. I got to move something around. A little white lie. It's okay. Because if you just say, oh, yeah, I can hop on that tomorrow, it's like, they're not going to respect you. And that's going to go into everything, like the price you're able to get, and then even just how they treat you. And like, oh, you can throw in 2 more emails, or you're going to have to scope creep, and who knows what other problems you're going to have, right?
If you give a mouse a
they're not going to
cookie,
respect you, huh?
If you give a mouse a cookie, they'll ask for a glass of
Exactly.
milk.
They're just going to literally exploit you. Yeah. I feel like cold DMs is just an invitation to be exploited.
See, I'm enjoying this because, you and I have never worked together.
No,
but
I wish we had.
Yeah.
Maybe we can someday.
One day.
Yes.
One day. A lot of the things that you're saying, a lot of the things you say in the book are things that I have, over the past 10 plus years that I've been doing this, and the 23 years that I've been writing for money, I have just noticed a lot of this and made the same observations that you are making.
Thank you.
Which,
you're validating me.
And you're validating me. Like, I'm
we're
glad
we're so mutually validating.
Yes, exactly.
Let's
You met your husband in a very particular way. You share the story in the book.
I do.
And you extract a number of very valuable lessons from that moment.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing them?
Well, I'll try to remember what they were, but I know one of them was always test your copy.
And what was the context? What did your husband do? How did you guys meet?
So the funny thing was, I was out with a group of friends. We were down at this beach bar, and he kept kind of looking at me like, "Oh, this guy's looking at you like, whatever." I wasn't interested, just because it's been a whole summer of that kind of crap, right? And I had a good friend in town visiting. So at one point, she and I go off on our own, and we're just kind of watching this reggae band. And that's when he made his move, and he comes up to me and he says, "Dance with me." And, I'm kind of like, is he telling me what to do?
Oh, it was David Bowie and Labyrinth.
It was just a little too much. No, it just, how some, like they say, like if you want to, resistance, like with the child parent thing, like I just wanted to push back immediately. Like, you telling me to dance with you? So I was like, not now, maybe later. And so he kind of slunk off. And then my girlfriend and I were, hanging out, watching the reggae band. And then we're like, no, let's just do tequila. You like tequila. We decided to do shots of tequila. And we go through that and do the whole thing. And I think he's watching. So then he comes up a few minutes later and he's like, "I've been watching you all night and I think you're gorgeous. Will you dance with me?" I'm like, gave my purse to my friend and we go out to the dance floor. So it was like much better copy, right? And you could we could pick apart this copy, but we're copywriters. We understand why that was much better copy, right?
Absolutely.
Flattery and, it was a benefit and, there's all these different things in that, right? Rather than just dance with me.
Right.
So, and I think the other part, I don't know if my other lessons were in there, but, sometimes you've got to like be a little more persistent, right? Because if he had just given up, my 2 beautiful children wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary next month.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of lessons, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, I think the main thing is test your copy. Don't give up on if somebody turns you down the first time. I mean, so many people turned me down, right? These big companies like Boardroom and Soundview. And then once I got some controls under my belt, they're like, "How quickly can we, when can you work for us?" "Well, maybe next June." "Okay, how much?" You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Completely different ball game.
Absolutely. One of the other reasons why I like that story, and I think there were 7 total lessons in the book.
Wow. I can't believe there are that many.
But I want to extract... There were so many.
You're such a good student.
Oh, thank you. So many people that I speak with, that are trying to learn copywriting have a lot of difficulty understanding what an angle is. And what that story, I think, very clearly illuminates and illustrates is how to change angles
Yes.
from the direct demand to, the different kind of approach, starting with flattery and, approaching it in a completely different way. Ultimately, the offer was the same, but the angle was different.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is difficult for a lot of newbie copywriters to wrap their heads
Right.
around.
Well, that's the same. Like if you were going to tackle, like let's say one of the practice exercises I recommended was look at a sales page that's working well, and what could you do differently to improve it by changing the headline and the lead, right? And a lot of that's going to be, you're not going to just, oh, let's just change 5 words and it's still the same. Like from a testing standpoint, that's not going to give you any appreciable difference in response, right? If you just shift a few words around at the same angle. So it has to be a whole different angle, right? So, yeah. So, and it's like, look how different Dance With Me was from, I've been watching all night. It shows interest, right? And I think you're gorgeous, flattery.
Yeah.
Would you dance with me?
Yeah.
And it wasn't telling me what the f- to do. It's like
the request.
it's a
versus-
choice. It's a choice.
Yep.
I respect that you have autonomy. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't throw my purse at my friend fast enough,
Absolutely.
and go out on the dance floor and dance with this crazy ass man.
That
who
you've
I
been
ended up
married to
marrying.
for 30 years.
Yeah, we dated for at least 5 or 7 years, and then I've been with this guy since 1988. That's nuts. You probably
Wow.
weren't even born then.
I don't even, I've been around myself since 1988, and I don't even like me that much. There are a couple other places that you actually recommend getting clients that I don't see very often talked about
Oh, really?
on the YouTubes.
Say.
It's okay. I have the notes here to help.
I know. Thank God.
So one thing that you talk about is conferences and events.
Oh yeah, they're huge. Look at us. We're having such a good time. Like you're like one of my best friends now. Like you're gonna be my best friend for like the next 20 years. I mean, I already feel it. But it's just that there's no replacement for that human connection. And P.S. This is what's going to save us in the age of AI, right? Because people are going to crave this more. But back to your point. Back to your point of when you're in person and you make connections, and like I said, there's that hypothetical situation where you're talking to somebody else comes up, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, she's really good at copy." You have people who will brag on your behalf, right? Potentially. Again, if you're just starting out, maybe not, but they'll just say, because a lot of us are very altruistic. Like we want to help others. We want to lift others. Those of us who've been successful, we have this thing. We can't help ourselves, right? We want to lift other people around us. And so you're going to be in these situations where you're just naturally going to start talking about, well, yeah, what do you do? Oh, yeah, I actually write copy for, companies that do a lot of things like you do, right? Oh, really? Well, maybe we should talk, right? So, yeah, no email can do that. No freaking DM can do that. No social media posts can do that, right? Most of the time, you're just going to look like a jerk bragging about yourself. So I think those real life human things are just huge. I mean, I remember just going to like traffic and conversion summit for the first time. I was like, I don't know, back in 2017 maybe. And somebody had said, oh, you got to stop by this one guy's booth because he does all this stuff. Like he works with this list company or whatever. So, and they had already told him about me. So I talked to this guy for 5 minutes. Next thing I know, he referred me to a few things. I got like $50,000 worth of work from that one conversation. Okay. So it was definitely worth going to that conference. And I've had so many other experiences like that have more than paid for the conference. And conferences are fun. We have a lot of good times, right? We had good times at Copy Legends, but and all of it can be written off. So it's like, it's a no-brainer. And so I think during COVID, it was really, really hard. We couldn't do these things, but conferences are coming back. Even if you're coming from overseas, come to US, come to a conference. Do not go to your room at all except sleep maybe. Like you have to be where people are. Go to the bar, even if you don't drink, and don't drink too much because you don't want to be one of these sloppy drunk people because you'll totally screw it up, right? But like, drink your water, chat with people, you know, be spontaneous, go to lunch, sit at a table where you know nobody, like don't go sit with your friends. Like all these things you got to do at a conference. That's how you maximize it. I remember sitting at like this one conference and this woman sat down next to me. Turned out we started talking and I had done this whole thing with the Healthy Directions business with Dr. Julian Whitaker. She's like, oh my God, I used to like own a health food store and we did this. Turns out she ran like a $40 million a year company that, you know, actually to make a long story short, she flew me down to do like in-person consulting, and even like 15 years later hired me to do like a whole bunch of stuff on retainer. That was just, you know, an extremely profitable relationship with somebody just sitting down next to me at a conference. So I've had multiple experiences like that.
Nightmare clients. You have a lovely, I think that's the longest chapter in the book.
Because there's so much to say about them.
Okay. So rather than force you to remember the types of nightmare clients, I have these all written down.
I studied up on that.
Okay, good.
Because I knew that's what everybody wants to ask about the 7 types of clients you meet on the road to copywriting hell.
All right. Well, let's ask some questions.
I had a feeling you'd have questions.
All right. The hasn't worked with a copywriter before. What is that type of client like?
Prepare yourself for lots of hand-holding. You're going to, and it's actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity, even if you feel like it's kind of a stretch for you, just freaking do it. Take them by the hand, be the expert, and be confident in what you know, even if you're kind of a little bit faking it, right? Because, like, they need to be led. They need to be led, and the more confident you feel in leading them, like they'll be trusting you. But if you're very tentative and you don't know what you're doing, they're going to be like, they're going to freaking drive you nuts because they're going to be so crazy tentative. Right. And they're, you know, like, oh, you know, so you have to take the lead. You have to take the lead. Like it's almost like two people dancing, right? You would never be able to even freaking dance. Like you have to, somebody has to take the lead. So take the lead and be prepared to do a lot of hand loading. But you know what? If you get a win with these people, like they're going to be so devoted to you and they're going to trust you. So it's a great opportunity if you handle it the right way.
Wonderful. The thinks they're a good copywriter client.
So this can be great or it can be miserable, right? It can be great in that, like I've worked with some really great copywriters that own businesses, like Lee Euler, for example, right? Who wrote the Plague of the Black Debt and
Have that book literally right there.
Everybody should read this. Legendary copywriter, right? Where, you know, and he's also so respectful because he understands what it's like to be a copywriter, and yet he can also contribute his ideas, and it makes everything stronger. And I've had other clients that are like this too that are great, right? So it's not always a bad thing. But then you have the people who, like, it's not exactly how they would write it. And so they're just all over you, right? Or they hate it, or they're just nitpicking, or, you know, they're changing things, and it's not as good. It's not as good because they think they're a better copywriter than they actually are. That's another problem, right? And and then your stuff doesn't work. And then then they blame you. It's like, well, you f***ing around with my shit, right? You know?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying. So it can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing.
The bootstrapping client.
Look, if you just need some work to get started and have some samples so you can get some good clients, like work with these people. But other than that, get the hell out.
Fair enough. And by the way, the bootstrapping client or type of client is one who's like trying to launch a business, but like on an absolute shoestring budget, like very, very little money. And so you, as the copywriter, don't want to be working for somebody.
So here's the thing. They might also try to rope you in with, well, we got an equity thing or we got this and that. It's like, really? So here's the thing. Don't work for free. And I mean, if they want to pay you a fee plus some piece of the action, maybe go for it. But just know it's literally like going to let's just go to like the most risky stock on the stock exchange and put $2,000 in. Like, it's a crapshoot, man.
Yeah.
So, or like buying crypto, maybe. I don't know. I don't buy crypto.
We don't want to insult the crypto.
We're not going to insult the crypto people. And I know some people gotten very rich. So I guess my point is it's a risk. And just know that you're taking a huge risk. Make sure you're getting enough to make it worth your time. But yeah, most of the time these people often don't value copy. So that's why they're a problem.
The flip-flopping client.
A lot of times this is somebody in a bigger company who is stuck between like some micromanaging boss and you, and they're in a really miserable position in life. And actually, part of me feels sorry for them. And so, yeah, they're just like, oh, wait, I told you the wrong thing. I want you to do this instead or whatever. And they're not the real decision maker on what you're doing. Or it's some, maybe solopreneur, entrepreneur type person who doesn't know what they're doing, and they're constantly second guessing themselves because they don't feel confident. And so they're constantly changing their mind because they're in some mastermind that says, oh no, you should be doing it this way. So they come back to you like, no, we need, and yeah, so they can drive you nuts. And so this is yet another reason to have everything in a project detailed and like put in. Like any variations will be done at the rate of X amount per hour, for example, right? Always put that in so they understand. They deviate. Here's what's going to happen, right?
Yep.
Pay me more.
Yep. The creepy crawly scope creep client.
Ooh. They're kind of similar. So yes, it's definitely why you want to have everything in writing and spelled out. Like if you add anything more, it's going to be additional fee, depending on what it is. But yeah, it's so easy to feel like, personally, let's say this is your situation. Oh my God, I finally got my first client or my second or third client, right? Or, oh my God, I didn't have anybody lined up for March and I finally got somebody, right? And they're going to pay me X amount. And then next thing you know, they reach out and they're like, oh, wait, do you think you could we just need one other email? And you go into pleasing mode because that's like, you're feeling like, I don't want to fuck this up, man. Right? I really need this. And you're needy. You're coming from a place of neediness. And this is not a good place to come from. Right? Horrible place to come from. And they can smell it. And then it's just setting the stage for more abuse. So you have to just put your foot down and you have to have your boundaries. It's just like, we all have our own issues in our personal lives, right? Where you have to have boundaries or people will take advantage of them. So this is where you really have to have your boundaries. And you have to just be like right from the get-go. You don't get a freebie. You don't get like a second pass because as soon as you give them a pass, they're going to think, well, I can just keep doing this. So the first time they do it, you have to say, oh, I'm sorry, that's outside of the scope of our agreement. Here's what I would charge for that additional amount. And I can just add that to the final bill.
Done. Yeah.
Just stand up for yourself.
Good. That's extremely good advice. I want to dig a little bit more into that.
Let's do it.
A little bit later. But we do have a few more of the kinds of clients you generally want to avoid. The horn dog client who makes sexual advances or remarks.
I knew this was going to come up. I have to have a drink on this one.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know. I mean, if you're a man, I don't know how much this happens to you, but it happens to women all the time.
Really?
Shock. I know.
Tell me about that.
What do you want to know?
So what is it like to be a woman?
Well, it's fabulous, actually.
I bet. I've actually been thinking about dabbling myself.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll give you some tips.
So there's not a whole lot to say about why these people are not pleasant to work with. But how might somebody avoid working with them? What are some of the red
You're not
flags?
going to know it. You're just not going to know it. Come on. They're a man. I mean, I'm not saying all men are like this because 98% are not, right? But my point is you're not going to see it coming. And so that's why I have that 2-sentence phrase in my book, right? Because you have to just have it implanted in your brain. And the only reason I had that implanted in my brain was because I was working at Phillips Publishing at one point during the height of the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings, right? There was a huge increase in awareness of sexual harassment, right? Because we all knew this shit happened, right? But nobody was talking about it. And suddenly it was like really huge, right? So companies started bringing in law firms to do little presentations because part of it was covering their butts, whatever. And so like Phillips Publishing brought in a legal team to talk about sexual awareness or harassment, right? And not awareness, sorry, harassment. And
wait, I'm not aware of sexuality. What?
I'm not.
What is that?
I don't know, but it's
I've
not,
never
it's
known
not
to
an
touch-
appropriate business context.
Yeah,
but
fair.
they did talk about sexual harassment. And so I'll never forget, there was this 2-sentence phrase that I learned. And then I just kind of, you know how you just tuck things away. I didn't need it at Phillips, thankfully, never needed it. And then, like, I don't know, couple years into my freelance career, like I was working with this one client pretty regularly, and I had met this one person, one like supplement, like just, had a supplement type of nutrient, right? I had met with this person in person, and very handsome guy. And then I was talking to a client who met with this person a little bit later, and then I was on the phone with him. He's like, yeah, he's like a really handsome guy. And I said something like, oh, he's not my type. And then he's like, well, maybe I'm your type. And then I just said my 2-sentence phrase.
And what is that 2-sentence phrase?
Well, I do have the book.
Oh,
I'll say it. I'll say what it is because I know. Everybody wants to hear it. When you say things like that, it makes me uncomfortable. I want you to stop. It's just very direct. Mm-hmm. And it's not like you're a asshole for saying that, right? It's not like critical. It's just like when you say things like that, it makes me uncomfortable. So you're taking kind of the blame off of them. Mm-hmm. I want you to stop. And that's called putting them on notice, right? You're putting them on notice. So from a legal sexual harassment standpoint, yeah, you're legally like in the workplace, you're putting them on notice. But this applies outside the workplace, right? Yeah. So I said this on the phone to my client. Well, guess what? Never came up again. We worked together for 10, 15 more years. I made millions of dollars working with this client. We had a great relationship. We still keep in touch, right? So then fast forward just a couple of years later, and I go to visit a potential a client that I've actually been working with. And we're just on our way to meet people to lunch. And he says something just out of the blue that just totally throws me. And and you know what? Because I had this phrasing already in my head, because most of us just can't like think on the spot like that, and that's why you need to have the scripts. You have to have the stuff, right? Yeah. And I just literally said the same thing, and that was it, and never came up. Worked for this person for many, many years, very well. Never had an issue, and again. Just to validate you, you could say, once this person says something like that, I never want to even talk to them again, and that's perfectly fine. But I will just say I was probably a little more accepting of it 15, 20 years ago, just because, honestly, it was more the norm. I don't know if it's still the norm now, because I just don't get hit on as much, because I'm like, an older woman, right? Yeah. But like, young people, like they get hit on all the time, and I don't know. I
have that problem tremendously.
Do you really? I know it must be hard.
I have
and
to
if you became a woman, you'd really have a hard time. I've had the experience of before I wrote this book. Like maybe it was before COVID even. Like I was at one of Kevin Rogers' events. I love Kevin Rogers. He does great events, Copy Chief Live, right? Mm-hmm. So it was back maybe 2017, 2018. I was at one of these events, and I was talking to a young woman who was a copywriter, and she was telling me that she had had some kind of experience like this, right? And I gave her this advice. And I could just see in her face, like, just how empowering it was to understand this and for me to share my story. And that's why I shared the story. Like, it's empowering. Like, we all have had this happen, and it's not acceptable. I mean, I know we used to laugh this shit off all the time, like 70s and 80s and 90s. It's not acceptable, you know? And it's sad that we have to sometimes have phraseology. And I'm not going to even say that it's just a woman thing. It's a man thing. Like, there are men who are sexually harassed. Let's just face it, right? Whether either from women or men. And so you have to have at your ready, like, an empowering script, because it's not acceptable for anybody to ever do that to you or make you feel that way, no matter who you are, right? So I had to put that in my book because I just found it so helpful just to have this ready-made script, and not even that I need it from a legal standpoint, but just say it. And it's not necessarily a blaming thing, but it calls somebody out and puts them on notice.
Yeah, that's good advice. Finally, the last type of nightmare client. The deadbeat client who pays late or not at all.
They suck, man. The worst. I think I tell a story about I was working like a fairly it was like a small to medium-sized project. I was working with this one client. It was like a kind of flat fee kind of thing. Thankfully, it wasn't a royalty deal, right? And so everything went very smoothly with the project. And so I sent the invoice for the 50% balance, and it just kind of wasn't paid, right? And I reached out a few times, like, you don't like bug somebody right from the beginning. You figure it's going to take a little time. I wasn't hearing anything, and everything gone so smoothly. I was literally checking the obituaries.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. I was like, did something happen to this guy? Like, I'm worried now. Like, I'm personally worried. Like, we had a good rapport. Everything went well. Like, I think it was somewhere in Colorado, right? So I'm like going online, like,
is this dude dead?
Did he like get a car accident? Like, what the hell happened, right?
Yeah.
Oh, couldn't find anything. A few emails, like, okay, you know what? $5,000 is $5,000, right? I mean, got my lawyer to write up a quick little demand letter. I'm like, why don't you FedEx it? Cool. Got paid the following week. Oh, you're not dead.
Yeah. When is it time to ask for a raise? You have great advice in the book about this.
Yeah. You mean when you're working with a client on an ongoing basis?
Yes.
I think when you've had some really great results, right? That's a huge one. I mean, you can't just do like nothing and to increase their business and then say, oh, you need to owe me more because I worked for X amount of months, right? Which actually happens in the real world, right? But like I was just counseling one of my mentees the other day who has worked with a client for about a year now on a straight retainer arrangement, and has grown the business by like, I don't know, 20-30% or something in sales, right? With his emails. He's just doing emails. And I'm just like, okay. So here's the thing. It's like a very small company, but it's like, this is your opportunity to change this into more of a revenue share arrangement. Like I think actually he was being paid per email. And some of these emails were more like sales type emails, but some of them were like, oh, I was just on this podcast, or I just did this, or XYZ, right? So more kind of building the relationship, but all of it translates to higher sales, right? And so why not say, look, let me manage your marketing, scheduling, strategy, and everything. Write all your copy. You pay me X amount for a retainer, and I get X% of the sales. And then if it's too much for them to swallow, you go to them and you say, all right, I understand sales are now at this level. With this new arrangement, anything over and beyond this level that we're at, you pay me X%, right? Yep. In addition to the monthly retainer. And we're not worrying about, is it 2 emails or 5 emails or whatever, because I'm now a partner, you know? So that was my advice to him. And that would be my advice to somebody. That would be one example of how to give yourself a raise. The other example would be, oh, I did this initial promo for you for $8,000 plus whatever, or maybe it was no royalty, and we got a huge winner. Well, I would like to now charge you $12,000 plus a royalty, right? And you literally give yourself a raise, and you can justify it because A, you've had the performance. B, well, you know, I have my schedule's getting kind of full, and I want to give you some priority because more people are coming to me and I'm getting busier or whatever, right? I mean, like, you are now more in demand because you've got some successes under your belt. So you absolutely, this is kind of like being the hot girl at the bar or guy, right? In your case. And so like you have to like be able to give yourself a raise. And literally one of the best times of year to do this, and it can also get you a lot of business, is do it at the very beginning of the year or maybe the end of the year. You say, coming up in 2024, I'm going to be raising my rates, but you can lock me into my schedule right now and I'll still charge you 2023 rates. You could do it that way. Or you could just say, everything's going up 10%, right?
Yep.
I mean, people who work in the real world get annual raises.
Yep.
Newsflash.
So I guess on that note then, the last question that I have for you is, how do you close with confidence, or just in general, how do you approach clients with confidence?
I think you need to feel like you don't need it. You need to do, I mean, if you do, like it's a little mind trick that you have to do to yourself because you cannot sound too hungry. I mean, you want to sound interested, but there's a difference, right? Different when you're interested, it's almost more like you're on the same level, right? Like you and I are having this conversation. We're very interested in what we each have to say. You want to have a conversation with the potential client. You're interested. You're going to ask a lot of questions about their business. And this is also a Dale Carnegie trick that I think I talk about in the book, which is the more that you show interest in somebody, the more that they like you. And the more they like you, the more likely they are to want to hire you, right? And want to work with you. So ask questions, be interested in the person, put whatever anxiety you have about, oh shit, if I don't get this thing, like I don't know how I'm going to pay my mortgage. Put all that like out of your mind, right? Just be in the moment, be interested in this person, be like, I don't really need this. Kind of, if you have to fool yourself, because you don't want any of that to come across. And that's how you should talk to them. You're interested in them. And if it works out, great. But you need to feel like you could walk away. Ideally, you set yourself up that you can walk away. And that's a whole other conversation. But it's just being smart with your money and not ever being in a position where you're so desperate that you have to get a client.
Wonderful. Kim, if people want to find you and hear more from you, online, or even hire you, or get mentored by you, or buy one of your courses, or buy your book.
It's a lot of things.
All of these things.
You can do all of these things. I'll tell you where. Go to kimschwalm.com, and I will spell it. It's KIMSCHWALM.com. And when you decide to get on my email list, you'll get my free Ultimate A-List Copywriters promo checklist, which is actually 5 checklists in one. And it's a free gift that you'll get when you join. Plus, you'll get my wonderful emails. And you can also find out more about my courses, mentoring, or even working with me.
Wonderful. Make sure to check out the book. It is available on Amazon or wherever one buys their books.
Actually, it's everywhere. So you can probably get it. If you don't want to do it on Amazon, you can get it on Barnes & Noble or wherever. I also do sell it, I think, at my website as a straight ebook. But yeah, if you can get the print copy, there's nothing like print.
I read it on Kindle, so I'm sorry.
You're forgiven.
Thank you. Thank you. Kim, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
So good to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course.
You're my new best friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.